This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Welcome to Chill Sketchbook Session number 4. Hope you guys are doing well and hanging in there. It took me a while to find the time to squeeze the sketchbook session in because it's been super busy for me lately. And this is kind of a shame because I'm really enjoying these a ton and I really want to get around to doing it more than once a week is something that I've been telling myself for the past few weeks, but unfortunately this is as often as I can get to it at the moment. So before getting into it, I wanted to thank you guys so much for leaving so many comments and likes on my videos lately. It means a lot to me and I'm gonna do my best to find some time to reply because I know I haven't been doing that a lot lately. Also, welcome to all my new subscribers. I'm super happy to have you guys as a part of our little community here, and I'm happy that it's growing. And I do kind of want to organize some sort of draw this in your style type of thing soon, like an event, I guess. But yeah, that's for the future. So anyway, I'm still on the hunt for the perfect inking instrument for this new sketchbook of mine, which I purchased from a fellow YouTuber and artist, Tricky Wagon, by the way. But yeah, in this video, I'm using a newly obtained fountain pen. It's the pen from the very beginning of the video, and FPR in this, super inexpensive, only $18 at the moment. I think they have some sort of sale going on, I believe. And I actually got the steel Ultra Flex nib, as some people have advised in some of my previous videos. So the total for the pen and the nib was $31, which I still think is not too bad, and I am very happy with the results. But before I talk in detail, or in more detail, about how my inking experience went, I'm just gonna get back to that when there's actually inking in the video. So yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that it's been super fun for me to work in a sketchbook, or I use the term work loosely. It's been more or less for fun, even though I do make videos out of it and it's a little bit tedious to record the process. I'm still struggling with that part. I find that it's hard for me to find like a good angle to film at that properly captures the footage but also doesn't get too much in my face. But I think I'm gonna try to address that by getting a new camera soon. But yes, that's a topic for later. So overall, I've been having a lot of fun with these sketchbook sessions, and I think it's starting to, like, the times that I used to spend drawing on my sketchbook for fun when I was in high school and like in college is starting to slowly come back. And yeah, I'm pretty excited about that because it's been a while since I've gotten around to doing anything like this. And I think the fact that I've been purposefully making time to sit down and use this new sketchbook has really helped me out a lot. So yeah, for this particular page, I wanted to draw more of a scene with a background, unlike most of the other pages so far. I think one of them kind of had a background, but for this one in particular, I actually went looking for inspiration a bit on Pinterest, and I did find a photo that I liked very much. It looked like a painting to me. I think the composition was beautiful and I really liked the use of light, so I wanted to use that as a base inspiration for this little drawing. And so this is the photo that I used. Like I said, I found it on Pinterest, and unfortunately at first well, unfortunately or not, the background kind of ended up melting away for the most part by the end of this drawing. Initially, I just was gonna make it of Heijin. As you can see, I always draw the same characters over and over again, but that's just how I go, I guess. Anyways, at first it was just gonna be Heijin, but then the longer I worked on her, the more I thought that I have so much fun drawing small character interactions that in the end I did decide to just put another character into the piece, which was kind of a last minute addition. And I think because of that, like, Noelle ended up covering the majority of the background element in this piece, so I guess the background ended up being a lot less than I thought it would be. But you know, there's always next time to challenge myself a little more by including a background. But yeah, so I figure I'll give you guys a little bit of context for this. So Of course, as always, these are some characters from the story that I'm working on, which is called Gloaming Veil. And I guess this is a bit of a soft visual development situation. By soft, I mean I wasn't making this drawing for the specific purpose of figuring out any solid visuals, but there is a part of the story. So, okay, let me just back up a bit. I've mentioned before in one of my videos that the reason why it's taking me forever to organize the story and write it is because it's kind of about the town and about the history of the town in some ways. And the story kind of takes place over a very long period of time, and some of the characters have little bits and pieces of story that's kind of scattered across the timeline. And so there's this one bit that has been on my mind for a while now, and I'm not gonna say anything too specific about it because, like I said, I always have the fear of spoiling the story, but it requires some more extensive costume design, and I don't have I don't have a solid idea of what the costumes are going to look like at this point, but I wanted to at least try starting to doodle things here and there to slowly get a better idea of what I want the costumes to look like, because it is kind of a thing of the past, as you can probably tell, and the costume designs are not the fashionable, modern type of stuff that I typically do. So yeah, I mean, that was kind of something that I wanted to try out for this piece pretty spontaneously. And like I said, I was inspired by Pinterest, and I also found a photo of a dress design that I loved very much. So what I drew here is very close to the photo, so I would imagine that in the future, when I do properly sit down to figure out the costume designs for this part of the story, it will probably end up looking quite different, but I do like this as a little experiment nonetheless, and it was a lot of fun to draw. I made a little bit of changes to the dress, but overall it was very similar to the picture that I used, so just wanted to put that in there so you guys can see, because most of my stuff that I've done so far for the sketchbook, actually every single thing up until now, I pretty much just sat down and pulled out of the thin air without using any sort of references whatsoever. But for this one, I thought it would be nice to change it up and find some outside inspiration, and thus I ended up drawing the dress pretty closely to the reference photo, and also the lighting scenario is very much inspired by the photo. It was a great reference to use. So yeah, I also wanted to mention that the fact that I didn't really thumbnail this at all kind of made the sketching process a little extra long for me, because I just kept changing around the placement of the limbs. This kind of ties into the way that I use reference photos as well. I knew that primarily I was going to use this photo for lighting, which is exactly what I ended up doing, and the composition, more or less, but I did change the posing quite a bit, and it took me a while to figure out what I want to do with it in the first place. And like I mentioned, since I ended up putting in an extra character, I did have to erase things a bunch of times, so as you can see, it took a while for the sketch to come together. But yeah, next time if I'm gonna do something like that, I definitely think I'm gonna pull out my other sketchbook and do a couple of super rough, tiny thumbnail sketches, which will hopefully help me determine the posing a little better ahead of time, so I don't have to do so much erasing. But yeah, overall it should be low pressure, like I said, since it's just a sketchbook. And yeah, still, I think the result was pretty decent and I do like it. So let me just take a quick minute to tell you guys about this video's sponsor, Skillshare. If you're on the lookout to learn a new skill, a fun new project, or some sort of casual creative outlet, but not sure where to start, I would highly recommend checking out Skillshare. It's an online learning platform with thousands of unique and interesting classes on a huge variety of topics, such as illustration, small business tools, self-care, video editing, plant cultivation, and a ton more, with new classes being added every single day. I usually recommend a class that I recently watched myself, but in case you're new to my channel and want to know more about my traditional illustration process in more detail, I have a class on Skillshare myself. It's called Character Illustration, Create a Character with Watercolor and Photoshop, where I explain my entire illustration process in a lot of detail, talk about which tools I prefer to use, and even include a live demo of warm-up figure sketching with commentary. You can check out my class and a ton of others by signing up for a free trial with my code or using the link below. The first 1,000 people to use the link in my description box or my code, Cosmic Spectrum Art, will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. And now back to the video. As you can see now in the video, I'm drawing the little fashion illustration that's next to the main piece that I was focused on. I mostly kind of wanted to just fill the space because at first I thought maybe it would be cool to put some sort of quote or, I don't know, figure out some other little scene to draw. But in the end, I actually just wanted to draw a full body version of Heijin just wearing this fancy dress, and I did that just for fun because recently I have been looking at some Sailor Moon concept art, which is something I've loved since I was very young, and it really kind of reminded me of how fun it was to just draw these little full body fashion inspired illustrations. So I decided to do that for the side of the page, and obviously it's relevant because it is the full version of the dress that Heijin is wearing. Yeah, it was a super quick sketch, and moving on. So I just want to talk about filling out a sketchbook. It's been so much fun working on the sketchbook so far, and I must say that I am enjoying looking through the couple of pieces that I have in it so far a lot. And I've always wanted to have one of those sketchbooks where every single page is kind of a more or less finished and completed piece, and it's very, very elaborate in a lot of ways. Definitely not a casual sketchbook by any means. And I wanted to mention this because to any of you guys that have not seen my videos before or are not too familiar with, you know, my other sketchbooks, by the way, I do have a couple of sketchbook flip-throughs, and I would advise you to look at those because they're very different from this one. My sketchbooks never look like this. I've never had a sketchbook that's completely filled with like completed and finished illustrations like this one, and this is kind of a first. It is an effort, and I definitely have another sketchbook on the side that I use for super rough sketches, doodles, like thumbnails, and whatever else messy kind of warm-up stuff that I want to do. So yeah, just putting that out there. I think if you are looking at this and thinking, oh my god, this is way too much to expect out of a sketchbook, it's too intense, it's very true, it is too intense. You definitely should not think of this as a regular sketchbook type of situation. It's a special occasion thing. I only really use it about once a week, like I mentioned, and sketchbooks are by no means anything like this on a regular basis. So yeah. I also wanted to mention that for this sketchbook in particular, I've been thinking a lot about what I kind of want to do in the future. So far, as you've noticed, I've been mostly using just ink and ink wash, and the color scheme, I mean, there isn't much of a color scheme. It's mostly just been sepia or like a brown tone, and that's about it, which is something I obviously stuck to for this illustration as well. But I am thinking of introducing some color slowly. I am afraid of color, especially traditionally, because I don't do it very often and I do have to put some planning into it. But I was thinking it might be nice to do some gouache studies. I haven't been doing studies really in some time now because I've been super busy with other things and work, I guess, mostly. But I've been thinking, I have so much gouache paint that I bought a couple of years ago that I haven't even touched, and I am planning to use some of it to do some studies. So in order to do that, I actually need to go buy some new art supplies. I realized that I have a lack of brushes. Most of my brushes are kind of the same, so I think it would be nice to have some square ones to use for the gouache purposes. But obviously, I will talk about that in the future once I actually have the supplies and I do try to use gouache once more. And yeah, like I mentioned, using more color is something that I really want to do. Not that I'm, bored of this super sepia toned color scheme, but I feel like it's starting to become a little bit one note. I think most of the things that I've been drawing lately have been in a very similar color scheme, so it would be nice to kind of change it up and do something more fun, I guess, or more vibrant looking. But yeah, so now that I am here at the inking stage of the footage, which already started a little bit ago, but yeah, I'm gonna tell you guys about my experience with using this new pen. So overall, I do like this nib a lot. It is a lot nicer to draw with than the previous ones that I've tried, excluding the G nib from my last video, of course, because the G nib is my favorite. But this one is the Ultra Flex nib, and it does allow for a lot more variation in line width, which is something I was looking for. So it definitely hit that point for me very nicely. The ink that I used inside the pen is Noodler's ink, just black, which I liked. Overall, it looks nice. It's got a little bit of variation in tone, even though I didn't. Obviously, it's just the ink straight without having diluted it at all. But I will say that I think I prefer the brown, so maybe I'm gonna look into getting a brown version of the Noodler's ink. And one thing that I noticed that is different from the previous few sketchbook sessions is that this ink actually takes quite a bit longer to dry than the other ones that I've been using. And that's a bit of an issue for me because I am not careful enough when I ink, so that I did end up smudging some parts, and I noticed that it was sticking to my my hands. So just to be safe, when I was done inking this piece, I kind of just let it sit and dry for a couple of hours. I had a bunch of other stuff to do anyway, so it was good to just leave it alone and let it dry properly. And I'm happy to say that once it dried, it did not revive much, from what I could tell after I was putting some ink washes on it. So it is really good. I would recommend this ink. I would just say be careful with waiting for it to dry properly, and just to make sure that it's no longer lifting or smudging before you move on to using any color or any sort of wet media on top of it. So yeah, like I said, super happy with it. The ink that I used for the wash is the Ferris Wheel Press Writing Desk ink, which is absolutely gorgeous brown color. I love it so much, so I wanted to use it again. It's the one that I used for the first couple of pieces in the sketchbook as well. And yeah, I like diluting it. I really like the orangey type of color that it gives when it's more diluted, and it's very easy to layer, and actually it does revive a little bit, so it acts kind of like watercolor since it's not super permanent like the other inks that I usually use, which is kind of cool. I guess it's somewhere in between. And yeah, I think it made a pretty huge difference once I put the tonals on the image. It really kind of changed the whole vibe of it, which I thought was pretty cool. Again, I do lament the fact that the background kind of vanished. I was looking forward to drawing some sort of background elements, but I think Noelle took up most of the space where those were supposed to be. But you can still kind of see the chair, and overall, I am very happy with the fact that it does look like a scene, more so than just characters floating in white space, as is something that I tend to fall back on most of the time. That's something that I kind of wanted to change up, because as much as I love just drawing characters floating on the page with no background at all, I do really love seeing like little self-contained scenes in other people's sketchbooks. Those are always so fun to look at, and so I wanted to add more stuff like that in my sketchbook. Yeah, so I'm gonna talk a little more about how the ink wash stage went over by the time it rolls around in the video, because as you can see, as you've probably gathered, the footage is something that was edited prior to recording this audio. Anyways, So yeah, I'll just tell you guys a little bit about what I've been up to for the past couple of weeks. As usual, I have been super busy just trying to juggle a million tasks. To anybody who made an order off of my shop, I apologize if I took forever to ship everything out. It took a little bit longer than usual, but I got all those orders out just today, and I guess it would be a couple of days ago by the time this video goes live. But yeah, I've been mostly working on my new art book, which is something I've mentioned before. I'm working on my new art book with 3D Total, which is a huge privilege to work with them, and it's been a lot of fun and also a lot of work. It's definitely taking me a lot more work than my previous art books that I've self-published, and I am extremely excited about how it's been coming together. I recently finished putting together the art journey timeline section, which is something that I was specifically excited about because it gave me an opportunity to go over my old art once again, and it was definitely a process. It took me a while to look at all my stuff, and I was kind of surprised by the sheer volume of it, so it was kind of difficult to narrow down pieces to show for each section that I ended up talking about. But yeah, without getting into too many details, that's definitely something that I've been putting a ton of time in lately, and I'm super excited for making slow progress on that front. And of course, I will let you guys know how that goes, and when the Kickstarter is going to be scheduled to go live, but it's not for a little while, so stay tuned for that. And actually, while I was looking at all my old art, I came across a few things that I singled out as something that would be nice to do the Draw This Again challenge for, and I'm kind of looking forward to that. Hopefully soon I'll get around to doing some of those again. And yeah, overall feeling kind of freshly inspired from looking at all my crappy old art. So yeah, looking forward to making some new stuff shortly. But yeah, so as you can see at this point, I am moving on to the ink wash stage of the drawing, and so I basically wanted to go very simple with this. I kept in mind that this is just a sketchbook piece and I didn't want to go super elaborate, so the first thing I decided to do was lay down one tonal wash just over the whole piece that will give the basic idea of the overall lighting. And that actually made such a huge difference right off the bat. It was really cool to watch it happen because it was super fast to put down this one wash. I basically just heavily diluted the Ferris Wheel Press Ink, the color being Writing Desk, my favorite. And yeah, it gives such a nice warm tone, and I will always really prefer just leaving out the highlights, which is actually one of the biggest reasons why I like transparent mediums to work with. Even digitally, I always leave the highlights out instead of painting them in. I don't know if that's like something people really think about too much, but it's definitely something I've noticed that I feel more comfortable with. And so I do really like to put down a wash while excluding the highlights. Something that I really like doing is finding little areas of focus that I particularly enjoy in the piece aside from the main focal point. In this case, of course, it's Heijun's face, which is so spectacularly lit as per the reference photo that I used. But the other little part that I wanted to focus on in this particular piece was the hands. So I really like drawing little hand interactions. Something I've realized kind of recently, but it's one of my favorite things to do. I actually really like drawing hands, so I'm quite happy with how it turned out in this particular case. Since it was kind of a last minute decision for me to do the little hand interaction between the two characters of Noelle just tying up or tightening the lacing, whatever, dress part on Heijun's dress. It was kind of difficult because I didn't have a reference for that, so I just kind of had to like guesstimate and make it up on the spot. But I do think it actually turned out relatively believable, and yeah, I decided to bring a little bit of attention to that part of the illustration by just having a light on Hagen's hand. I just want to mention that because I know that maybe technically it wouldn't make sense for her hand to be lit in that particular spot, but I wanted to bring attention to it, and as an artist, I guess those are the kind of liberties that we do get, so things don't have to always 100% make sense. You can just kind of make these lighting decisions based on what you want to draw the eye to, and as long as it kind of seems believable, which I think in this case it kind of does, it's all good. So yeah, overall very happy with how this turned out, and I had to stop myself from putting too much into the little details on the dress. And I will have to say that I wanted to mention that there are obviously a lot of things that could have gone a lot better in this piece, and I think the dress shading or shadows is one of those things that could have gone better. I should have probably looked up some references on what silk looks like, but overall, I think it still turned out alright. And I wasn't 100% sure what to do with her crown thing in terms of lighting, so I kind of just left some white blotches there. And I was kind of afraid that it might take away the focus from her face, but I think overall it still helped, and I basically reinforced the face focal point by putting darker tones around it, the silhouette of her, or like the outline of her face, to create more contrast, because as you guys probably know, the contrast, the place that has the most contrast is the first place that people will typically look at. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much all I have to say about this piece. And yeah, happy to have worked on my sketchbook once more, and thank you guys so much for watching these videos. I hope you enjoyed the process and maybe you learned something new along the way, and I'm excited to make more of these videos. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!